Shri Gurudas Nulkar
So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Nulkar on this forum. Dr. Nulkar is well-known ecologist and educator from Pune. He is currently serving as director at Center for Sustainable Development in Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics. He is also trustee of Ecological Society and a senior fellow at Pune International Center. He is also worked as visiting faculty at IIT Kanpur and ISCC Bangalore, and very well-known personality. He has been awarded with various prestigious awards and postdoctoral fellowship by Australia. Uh, so, a researcher, a thought leader, and also a well-known author. He has written several books in English and Marathi, and his book Anartha Shastra has also recognized by government of Maharashtra for the work that is written there by C.D. Deshmukh Award. And beyond the books, he has also written several papers in journals, and also he is a writer for various articles in Marathi. His articles are getting published on frequent basis in Marathi magazines and periodicals. So he's beyond the academic work. He's also involved with the policy and guiding practical conservation work. So he does this work through his association through of ecological society, uh, and he's educating people and providing a kind of guidance how you can converse with nature and have a balance while living in the current way the humanity is living. So I was very fortunate to work with him during my association with the Center for Sustainable Development. So very lucky to have you here, sir. The forum is yours.
Thank you so much, Vasudevji, Kaustubji, and the entire team at Vivekananda Kendra. Today, I'm going to talk about the intersection of ecology and economy, especially with the perspective of considering it as a nature emergency. We are sitting at the cornerstone of a situation where our species faces the threat of extinction. So, the way I'm going to structure this, I'm going to talk about just four things. I'm going to start because we're going to talk about the intersection of ecology and economy. I want to take a few minutes to explain the earth, its ecosystem, and the ecosystem services, because this is not something that we consciously think about all the time. Then I will go on to expound the ecology economy relationship, and then I will talk about growth, unsustainable development, and then finally towards solutions. So we will spend a lot of time on solutions, but also talking on growth and unsustainable development. And at any point of time, if you have any questions, please do stop me, because it's very difficult to remember what question you had at the end of the session. So it doesn't matter. And if I'm able to answer that question, it's great. Otherwise, I will definitely get back to you. So, Earth, our common home. This is something very basic philosophy to understand, that an economy is possible only on a planet like Earth. Nowhere else, not on Mars, on Pluto, on Saturn, on Uranus, nowhere else is life possible. And because life is not possible, there is no possibility of an economy. So, the fundamental reason that we have this great fortune of being surviving on a planet like Earth is because of one singular characteristic of the planet, and that is the availability of liquid water. In all other planets, there is water either in gaseous form and or in ice, as in ice, like in Pluto and the other places. That so we are the only planet where we have water in liquid form, and one of the fundamental reasons that we are so fortunate to have that is because of our unique position in the solar system. Our orbit is perfectly chosen for water to be in liquid form. A little too close to the sun, and water would always have been in gaseous form. A little too far, and we would always have got water in solid form. So we have the first great jackpot that we hit, which is the orbit. The second is we had the moon formation, which was a very large meteorite which struck us around 4.6 billion years ago. This moon stabilized our orbit, reduced our rotation speed, revolution. It gave us 24-hour days. It did everything that was very, very important as a second source of gravity. And this became another very important factor for life to form. And the third is our axial tilt of 23 degrees, where we got the seasons and so on and so forth. But the most important reason is why is liquid water so important? Liquid water is flow of water is essentially a flow of energy. So when for thousands of years it started raining, like it has started raining here in Murud in Konkan right now, I think you should be able to hear the sound of the rains. Uh, Tell me if it gets too much, then I'll shift inside. But right now, you know, around 4.6, 4.5 billion years, when the temperature of Earth reduced and the temperature got enough for water to condense, it rained for thousands and thousands of years. And this rain started flowing. So the flow of liquid water is the flow of energy. It cuts the soil, it devours the rocks. All the volcanic eruptions had taken out extremely precious minerals from the center of the earth. They were trapped in rocks, but this liquid water helped those minerals to come out. So it erodes, it deposits, it cuts ravines, it creates valleys, it creates altitudes, it removes soil from one place and deposits into another. Just think about it. Nowhere else in the entire solar system has soil moved. Soil movement is possible only on Earth because of liquid water carrying the soil. And therefore, you have so many metals which have come out, so many minerals which are there in the soil. And we have the first important diversity on the planet, which is the physical diversity. Physical diversity, if you look at the physical diversity on the planet, we have different sunlight, mountains, altitudes, minerals, temperature, so on and so forth. This physical diversity becomes extremely crucial for the next step, which is the biological diversity. In fact, the biological diversity of any place is a response to the physical conditions of that place. And therefore, you have completely different vegetation in Himalaya than you would have in Western Ghats, or it would be different in Manipur than you have in Germany's Black Forest. It's because of the physical diversity is it gives rise to the biological diversity. If you look at the physical diversity of India, we have 10 different kinds of geographic zones, right from Trans Himalaya to the Gangetic Plain, to the islands, to the semi arid zone, to the deserts, to the Gangetic Plains, so on and so forth. This phenomenal diversity, I bet you won't be able to find in any other country on the planet, except maybe Brazil and some other South American countries. Nowhere else is. And most of our country is in the tropical climate, which means we enjoy sunlight throughout the year, and it creates the phenomenal natural capital that the country is blessed with. Now, this has created not one, not two, but 13 different types of forests, right from tropical wet evergreen to dry alpine scrub. This diversity is absolutely phenomenal. You go to Italy, you go to England, you go to France, you go to United Arab Emirates, you go to Singapore. This diversity is totally absent. They have one type of forest. Almost the entire Europe will have two or three different types of forest. But in one country, we have so many different types of forest. This is our natural capital. And this is really the wealth that we should be trying to save. The reason why we have such a phenomenal diversity in flora and fauna is because we have this phenomenal diversity uh, in the physical form, right? So we have different sunlight, the weather, the precipitation, the soil. All of this is totally different. The sunlight reaching Ladakh is totally different from the sunlight reaching Kanyakumari. The rainfall of Manipur is not the same as the rainfall that Kutch gets. The soil of Vidarbha is different from the soil of Konkan. All this diversity has created the flora and fauna that the country is so rich in. So, for example, India has nearly 9% of the world's flora, 9% of the world's flora, and almost 7% of the world's fauna. And this is just what the scientists have discovered. There is a lot more species that scientists are yet to discover. And how much of land do we have? We have just 3% of the land on the planet. This 3% of the land is a home to 9% of the flora and 7% of the fauna. Imagine the phenomenal natural capital that we have and the kind of economy we had before the British came here. We were thriving in natural capital. The people were totally different. And because this physical diversity and biological diversity is so rich, we have the next thing, which is the social diversity. We have different human culture relationships, human nature relationships. We have different food culture. We have different languages. We have different ways that we celebrate festivals in. This is the reason why the ingredients of the sambar masala are not the same as the ingredients of the rajma or the chole masala. There is a reason to this diversity, and this is absent. Again, I keep talking about Europe. You go to any country in Europe, you won't find this diversity. And it starts with the physical diversity. So, this is the kind of rich wealth that we are endowed with. Let me talk a little bit about ecosystem because these are very important in the economy. This background I'm trying to establish because we are going to come to economy ecology intersection. Yeah, so it's imperative for me that we are all on the same page about what ecosystems are, the natural capital that the country has, so on and so forth. If you look at any landscape, like this beautiful picture of the source region of a river in Konkan that you see, you will see physical elements like rocks and water, you will see sunlight, you will see at different temperatures here, you will see soil, mud, all of this. These are physical elements. Then, of course, there are biological elements. You can see flora, there are fauna, there would be insects, fish, crustaceans, amphibians, reptiles, so on and so forth. There will be fungi, there will be microbes in the water, in the soil, all of that. Now, the major activity between physical elements and the biological elements is that it is continuously exchanging matter and energy. Relentlessly, 24 by 7, 365 days of the year, the physical elements and the biological elements are continuously exchanging matter and energy. And this is what we call an ecosystem. So, for example, what I see right now in front of me, there's a beautiful garden which I'm looking at. That is an ecosystem because there are physical elements and there are biological elements. The tree is taking sunlight, which is a physical element. It is taking moisture from the soil, physical element. It is taking nutrients from the soil, minerals, physical elements. It is taking all of this and converting it into a biological element, which is a cell. This cell transforms into a leaf. This leaf falls into the river. It is exchange of matter. The leaf is eaten by a fish, exchange of matter, conversion into energy. The fish is in turn eaten by us, exchange of matter and conversion of energy. This is continuously happening on the planet. And because this is happening, we get what we call as the ecosystem services. All of you know exchange of matter and energy, but you know it in different names. For example, hydrological cycle, Jalavayu Chakra, is an exchange of matter and energy. Food production, the food that we get in our farms, is nothing but an exchange of matter and energy. Atmospheric gas balance, the reason why we have exactly 20% of oxygen in the air, the reason why there is groundwater, fresh water in the ground, the reason why there is carbon sequestration, all of these are what are called as ecosystem services. They are simply invaluable in the economy. Without these, we would not be alive. These are the life support systems of the planet. This is the reason which keeps us alive, right? Now, once we have established this, let us come to the ecology economy connection. And please bear with me. I know I'm talking to a group of very learned people here. I'm sure all of you also would have studied economics and all that. But as a standard method, I try to oversimplify what is an economy. So please bear with me for a couple of minutes, even if I sound a little too juvenile. So how can you explain economy to, let's say, children? The very easy way to explain economy to children is that there are two sides to the economy. One is we have households where you and I live, and the other side you have companies which make goods and services. These companies, these industries produce the goods and services which are in turn bought by households like you and me. And we go and work there, we provide the labor. So the yellow arrows is a flow of goods and services in the economy. And as this grows faster and faster, the wealth generation, the income generation is faster. But because we buy these goods, we have to pay them. So the flow of white goods is the flow of money. And because we work for them, they have to pay us wages and salaries. And in the center sits the government who collects the taxes and provides the infrastructure for a well lubricated economic growth. So the government gives us roads, railways, seaports, airports, judicial system, courts of justice, police, fire brigade, everything that is needed. And this is the way that the economy keeps growing. Now, the measurement of the growth of the economy is done by GDP. And I'm 100% sure all of you know this, but I'm just kind of oversimplifying and again reiterating that this just so as to lead you to the ecology economy connection. I'm doing this. So uh, and GDP is nothing but the measure of flow of money, right? So this becomes the fundamental understanding that every economist has, every government has, that the economy has to rise, and if the economy has to rise, the GDP has to grow. If the GDP has to grow, more goods and services has to flow in the marketplace. So the recent 22nd September declaration of reduction of GST is aimed at increasing the market for goods and services, market for whatever is produced in the industry. And as more demand is stimulated, we hope that there will be more flow of money and the GDP will rise further. So this becomes a fundamental understanding. Every government, it doesn't matter if it's an NDA or UPA or whichever government, not just in India, anywhere in the world, the only aim in a democracy is in the next 5 years how you show a growth in the economy. And that becomes the goal of every government. But that goal hides two very important facts. And the first fact is hides is that every rupee made in the economy consumes natural resources. Everything that you see around you has consumed natural resources. I'm wearing a t-shirt which is made of polyester, it is made of crude oil. I'm using a chair which is made of plastic. I'm sitting on a table which is made of timber. I'm sitting in a house which is made of clay bricks and cement, which is made of gypsum and limestone and water. The food I eat is come from the earth. Everything, every rupee in the GDP consumes natural resources. It doesn't matter if I'm making goods, even services. A chartered accountant and a lawyer also consumes natural resources to be able to provide their services. So the first thing that we know for sure is that when we say that the GDP has to increase, we know that the natural resources will be consumed more and more. This is a fact that everybody knows, including all economists. And the second thing, which is less widely known and less acknowledged, is that pollution is caused only by economic growth. If you have been to a forest, there is no pollution in the forest. And the reason is because whatever nature has made, nature can recycle, reuse, decompose, repurpose. The only thing which nature cannot recycle, reuse, decompose, or repurpose is a molecule made in our factory. So, for example, plastic is not made in nature and nature finds it difficult to decompose. Shampoo, detergents, toothpaste, clothes, LCD projectors, laptops, computers. None of these are made by nature, and therefore, at the end of the life, they will be waste which is polluting nature. So, the second very important thing that we know is that when we say that GDP has to increase, we know for sure that pollution will increase. You would have heard of a term called zero pollution industries. Well, it's a figment of an economist's imagination. It doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist because of a very simple law of nature which says that entropy has to increase, the second law of thermodynamics, which means the output of any system can never be more than the input. So at every stage in manufacturing, the output is less than input. Right from conveying crude oil from Russia to Khambat, from Khambat to a refinery, from the refinery to the factory, from the factory, the transport, the creation of every process, each process in the factory generates waste. This waste is either put into the atmosphere or into the soil or into the water, which means the economy treats the world as a sink for our pollution. And these two things, nature as a provider and nature as a sink, are two of the most critical functions of every economy. Without these functions, the economy does not exist. So, if you look at what is consumed in the natural resources, we can very easily see that over 55% of the world GDP is highly and moderately dependent upon nature. This term, highly dependent on nature and moderately dependent on nature, is not my terminology. It is a World Economic Forum terminology, WEF terminology, which classifies a business as a highly nature dependent, moderately nature dependent, or uh, less what is the third thing? I forgot. Okay, less nature dependent. These are three terminologies. 55% of the world's GDP comes from highly and moderately, and all other businesses have got hidden dependency, right? So, which means, for example, a chartered accountant is doing auditing. He is not directly dependent upon nature, but he has a hidden dependency, which means he needs to use computers, he needs electricity, he needs fossil fuel, he needs to travel, he needs to eat, he needs all the resources, which therefore they have a hidden dependency on nature. 55%, right? The second is the ecosystem services that we talked about. We talked about ecosystem services, which is the hydrologic cycle, the provisioning services, all of these things that we talked about. They amount to a spectacular 1.5 times of the world GDP. The provisioning services, the provisioning of minerals, the provisioning of gases, the provisioning of fresh water, the provisioning of soil, the provisioning of timber, the provisioning of crude oil, coal, minerals, all of this is what the nature provides. Regulating services, climate regulation, oxygen regulation in the atmosphere, disease control, climate control. These are regulating services, cultural services, the aesthetic services, the educational services. We learn from nature. The supporting services, soil formation, hydrologic cycle, all of these are what are there. Yes. Surya Banerjee's question is that what is the basis of the estimation of 1.5 times? Okay, the basis of estimation of 1 times is what the World Economic Forum gives us, and it is also based upon Constanza's seminal paper, which was written in 1997, which has been revised several times. And you're absolutely right; it is far more than 1 times of world GDP. The only reason that we are not able to quantify it properly is because a lot of these services are invaluable. You cannot have a monetary figure attached to, for example, something like hydrologic cycle. So many of these services you cannot quantify at all, and thus to an economist, I maintain what is generally accepted in international economic language as 1.5 times. But I completely agree with you, Sanjay ji. It is far more than 1.5 times. The next is, if you look at pollution, we treat the planet as a sink for our waste. Only in 2023, CO2 emissions, was to the tune of 36.8 gigatons of carbon. Look at that. That's so phenomenal. And the planet has a capacity to absorb this emission. This is not coming from the biogenic cycles. It is not a natural emission. It is completely part of anthropogenic activities. Around 12 million tons of being dumped into the ocean, plastic are being dumped into the ocean every year. So ocean already has 150 million tons of plastic. All of these are estimates, and I'm sure they are much more than what I've written here. 2.24 billion tons of solid waste is annually generated in the world. This is again an estimate. Around 80% untreated wastewater release, persistent organic pollutants. All of these are creating the atmosphere for us to have all these diseases, this new thing which are coming up. Now, this is the bottom line of what I want to say. The economy is possible simply because nature works silently and invisibly. Yeah, these are the words of Partha Dasgupta in his biodiversity report. And this makes it free and invaluable. We don't pay nature. We pay the milkman. We don't pay the cow. We pay a company which extracts minerals. We don't pay nature for what we are taking out. So we are using these resources absolutely free of charge. We are paying for the labor required to extract them. So they are absolutely invaluable to the economy. And this is how nature works silently. And one of the biggest problems that we have is we never value our resources correctly. And it's very difficult to value them correctly. So if you look at any business, the what is the dependency of the business on nature? Every business depends on nature at least in three ways. One is their supply chain, back end, upstream, whatever is coming to them. In their direct operations, they use resources, and the customers, while using their products, also need to use resources. So these are at least three ways that businesses use that, and only when they use this can they generate a profit or can they contribute to the GDP. So if you look at the supply chain, let's say we are talking about a company which is making cars. The company which makes cars, in their direct operation, they use crude oil, they use electricity, they use water, they use land, they use human resource, they use plastics, they use minerals, all of that. But all their suppliers also use that. They use timber, they use minerals, they use stone, maybe they use land, water, everything. And when I, as a customer, buy the car, I have to use fuel, I have to use water, I have to use land for that. So, even in the life of that, now this entire business of making cars is thus completely dependent upon nature, whether directly or indirectly. If you look at the sectors, let's say the agricultural sector, the supply chain is dependent upon natural resources. The direct operations are dependent upon natural resources, and the customers also use natural resources. We need to cook the food, so therefore we have to use that. Snack food. There are giant companies in the world which make snack food, huge monopolies across the world. They are also present in India. They are completely dependent, highly dependent upon nature. They need food, they need imports, they use all of that to make snack food. Construction industry is another which is very highly dependent upon nature. It needs to use cement, it needs water, it needs clay, it needs bricks, it needs land. All of this is so highly dependent on nature. Clothing industry, textiles, cotton, polyester, everywhere in the supply chain, in the direct operations, in customers. And I've just given a few examples as these sectors. You can think of any sector and find out what it is done. Let's look at India. Okay. How is the Indian economy dependent upon nature? So if you think about the ecosystem services, fresh water and pollination services, there is one study which talks about a contribution of nearly 1.1 lakh crores of pollination services which are directly infused into our Indian economy. We know that the economy cannot be present without food production, and our food production is so highly dependent upon pollination. For example, these crops which I've written: mustard, cotton, apples, citrus fruits, guavas, brinjals, tomatoes, all of them are totally dependent upon pollination services. Our agriculture is entirely dependent upon the hydrologic cycle. You know, let me say this here in this forum, there is no fresh water on the planet. The planet only comprises of marine water. The only way that the planet generates fresh water is through the hydrologic cycle. So all the fresh water that is trapped in the polar ice caps, in the Himalaya, in the groundwater is a result of the hydrological cycle over millions of years. If one year the hydrological cycle breaks down, the entire country becomes thirsty. So this is an absolutely invaluable service which I have not even calculated here. It's impossible to calculate the value of ecological services. We will do it at market prices, which is not the right way. I mean, if you look at market price of agricultural water, it's a few paisa per 100 liters. And if you multiply that with the hydrological cycle, you won't even get a realistic figure. So many of these services are not even valued properly in the economy. Look at India's domestic material consumption. This is taken from the resource panel of United Nations. You know, United Nations has got a resource consumption panel. Global material flows you can get on that. And this graph is I have made from this particular thing. So this is exactly, look at the way the consumption of materials, biomass, fossil fuels, metals, non-metallic minerals, all of these are being consumed at such a high rate. uh, if you go from India to the world, look at the way that the world GDP is increasing. This is from the IMF data. There is a little bit of difference between the IMF data and the World Bank data, but it doesn't matter. The graphs follow the same principle, so they look exactly alike. Um, Now, unfortunately, in economics, price is a very perverse signal, and price can send a wrong signal because it is not really the price cannot really encourage frugal consumption. I'll give you an example. Let's take the stock of fish. Okay, suppose I'm in Konkan right now, and pomfret and surmai are two fish which are very popular here. Now, let's say the stock of pomfret fish in the ocean declines. Now, the first thing that's going to happen in the market is as the supply reduces, the price goes up of pomfret fish. Now, because the price of the fish goes up, more sellers want to sell at the higher price. Now, if more sellers want to go sell at the higher price, they will go out and start extracting more pomfret from the sea. And this makes the resource stock decline faster. So this price is an incorrect signal which the government, which the which the market sees, and thus and there are many such examples. You could take any resource. For example, if crude oil price goes up, there are many more countries which want to supply crude oil at a higher price, and this happens to everything. If you look at the economy in a philosophical way, we extract natural capital as economic inputs, we turn them into financial capital, and we externalize the net damages. So the depletion and pollution, habitat destruction, biodiversity loss, we don't take care at all. So fighting climate change is absolutely crucial, but it is not sufficient. Our global ecological footprint is today exceeding the biosphere's regenerative rate. The rate at which nature regenerates, it is at a geological scale in many ways. And in some cases, it's in a human time scale. But that becomes that. So growth and unstable. So why do we have the GDP? Simply because it's convenient and self-external. But we know that it includes war, terrorism, and it excludes all of that. So the question here, which is more pertinent, is why doesn't economic growth result in development? And for that reason, we have to look at what are called as market failures. And I'm just going to talk about 6 market failures that I'm kind of studying in that. The first is that what we call as the tragedy of the commons, based on Garrett Hardin's brilliant essay in Science in 1971. The tragedy of the commons is that because nobody owns these natural resources, nobody has the responsibility to use them frugally. And therefore, it very quickly results in what Garrett Hardin termed as the tragedy of the commons. So this is the first thing. So our natural resource. If you look at the Indian Bureau of Mines, the website of Indian Bureau of Mines, you will see a list of stocked out mines. There are over 100 mines in India where the minerals have been completely exhausted. Indian Bureau of Mines publishes this list periodically, not every year, but once in a couple of years. And if you go to the website, you'll find this mine. This is what we can term as the tragedy of the commons. The second is that in any economy, as affluence increases, more resource intensive products are made. So if you look at the mobile phones, every mobile new model of mobile phone that is made consumes more resources than what were consumed earlier. Every new model of a car consumes more resources than were consumed earlier. Fashion consumes more resources. And because this happens, these resources are diverted more toward the affluent society, because businesses don't want to serve the poor, they want to serve the rich, because that's where the profits lie. So resource distribution starts getting skewed as affluence in the society goes up. Pollution, of course, is the most important one, is the negative externalities. The granddaddy of all pollution is the greenhouse gases, which we have seen. These greenhouse gases are what have caused the climate change at a global level. Or if you look at the fourth failure, is that we have growth, we have economic growth, but it is not creating jobs which are commensurate to the growth. Right? So this is what is called as the jobless growth, and every growth in the GDP does not relate in a correlating growth in the job. And it's very simple and easy to understand why this doesn't happen, is because automation, mechanization. You know, automation replaces human labor, and it's very important for businesses to make profit. If you can't, people make mistakes, people cannot work for 12 or 24 hours, people don't have so much productivity, machines have that. So an ERP software replaces several jobs. A simple accounting software has replaced the job of BCom across the country, so on and so forth. So jobless growth, one ATM, one FASTag, one email reduces hundreds and hundreds of jobs. The third is income inequality. The fifth is income inequality. The kind of inequality that we face in the world today is growing phenomenally. Right? The haves and the have-nots. The valley between the rich and the poor is continuously increasing by every report, poverty report of Oxfam, of FAO, of everybody. And finally, the allocation of taxes. You and I, we have no control on how the government will allocate the taxes. Do you want to build more bridges, more metro rails, and more flyovers in a city, or do you want to provide electricity 24 by 7 to farmers and landless poor who are scattered across India? Do you want to create libraries in very small villages? Do you want to give them places of entertainment for theaters, or are you going to draw everybody to cities? That is the question that we cannot understand, right? So, for example, uh, the largest amount of um, usership is for buses, state transport buses. And look at the condition of the state transport bus stands in Pune or in any village in Maharashtra. They are horrible. On the other hand, look at airports. Every year, the government is giving millions and millions of rupees to improve airports. Why do we need so much improvement in the airports? There are no clean toilets for women on ST stands, but on airports, we have smoking rooms. This is where our taxes are going, and we have no control on that. Right? So the negative externalities, the pollution which I was saying, has resulted in exceeding of the planetary boundaries. Now I'm sure all of you have already looked at or studied the planetary boundaries framework by the Stockholm Resilience Institute, or else you can just look it up and read about it by Johan Rockström. Now, what this a planetary boundary says is that there are 9 planetary boundaries which cannot be exceeded, of which only 3 today are not exceeded. The rest of these are all exceeded. For example, novel entities, we have put more persistent organic pollutants, we have put more radioactive waste We have put more plastic into the biosphere than it can absorb. The climate change concentration of greenhouse gases is more than the safe operating limit. The biosphere integrity, the functionality, and the genetic diversity, the composition of ecosystems is reducing and changing so dramatically that it is reducing the biosphere integrity, the land change system. We are diverting so much land to agriculture, and this agriculture is not for food, it is for the meat industry and the dairy industry. The freshwater change, the biogeochemical flows, the phosphorus cycle, the nitrogen cycle, these are the two cycles which have completely broken down today. Um, so now we come to the last part, which is beyond solution, towards solutions and beyond. I call this beyond ESG because as businesses we are totally fixated upon environment, society, and governance. ESG, BRSR reporting. It has only come to that extent now. We are only talking about reporting today, but there is far more things beyond the reporting. And this is something which I always tell my students. Businesses cannot survive in a nature depleted world. This is the bottom line. If you don't understand this, then there is no future for our species and our economy. So, what is the reason? How do we go towards a solution? First and foremost, we have to realize that sustainable development is the growth, not is the goal, not growth. Today, every government feels that growth is the goal. We have to grow the economy, we have to grow the GDP. This is a means. So, therefore, if we put growth as the goal, then we have an extractive, unrestricted use, highly centralized, carbon intensive economy. On the other hand, a sustainable development should be improvement in quality of life, equitable material conditions, maintaining Earth's capacity to sustain life. This is what should be there. So, therefore, we have to move from growth by all means to green growth, which is regenerative, decentralized, localized, low carbon and pollution, which is internal. Is this possible? Of course, absolutely possible. And many businesses have shown that. What we want to do is we want to increase well-being, economic growth, and employment, and to reduce resource use and emissions and impact. This is the kind of graph we would like to look at. And how are you going to look at? First is we have to reimagine manufacturing and consumption. Today, we have a very linear economy. Take, make, use, throw. Every time we throw, we increase the profits, we put more GDP into the economy. Can we change that? Of course, it can be changed. Instead of take, we can reuse, we can recycle, we can repurpose more material. Instead of make, we can refurbish, we can make modular thing and keep adding on to it. Instead of use, we can build products for longer life, for renting, for sharing, for upgrading. Instead of throwing, we can return, we can take back, we can repair, we can recover, compose. All of these will essentially give us a circular economy. So it will reduce the take and it will reduce the throw and will give economic growth in make and use. And is this possible? Absolutely possible. Look all around you. There are businesses across the world which are creating for renting, for sharing, for repurposing, for recycling, for composting. So many businesses are coming up. They are adding to the GDP growth without consuming resources and improving circularity. So these are the kind of businesses that we need. Design for the environment, cradle to cradle, making from waste, consuming more renewable resources, made to reuse, made to lease. So many things. I'm going to share this PPT with those who want. Three basic things we need to do. We need to improve resource efficiency. As a country, we are one of the highest per capita consumers of fresh water. We can use that resource more efficiently. We have started consuming electricity per capita very highly. That needs to be improved. Circularity needs to be there, and renewable resources have to be used. For lack of time, I'm just skipping ahead. And finally, my last slide is that it's not about industries, but it's about consumers. We, as buyers, drive unsustainable growth. We demand more mobile phones, we demand more clothes, we demand more shoes, and we have industries making them for us. So if we are unable to have a very conscientious consumption, then we will never get a sustainable economy. Thank you. That's my light.
Thanks, Gurudaji. Very fascinating presentation.
Thank
I
Thanks, sir. It has been a very interesting thing. Once we got the your profile from Vasudev ji, then we just try to understand your span and reach of your work in multiple platforms. In fact, I was blessed to be in ISET recently for our Bengaluru symposium, where we had an institutional activity of engaging stakeholders on the climate change perspectives. So it's nice to hear you, sir. And
thank you.
there is no question about what we said as such. The question is basically on an individual level and at the family level and at the societal level or at the stakeholders level. What minimal actions to be taken and how it could be you follow to be done despite challenges as you have already observed it in practical things. So how do we move forward at our pace, either for an individual person or for an NGO perspective, of different stakeholders as such? How do we move forward? How do we sensitize this perspective so that even a person who is a practitioner of this, even at their own family friend, they may have a lot of challenges. So how do we move forward in this pursuit? Probably in a position as a practitioner and also being in this field for a longer time. You could tell us.
Yeah, so I believe you're right, and that's why my last slide was about ourselves. How can we become more conscientious consumers? That is the most important question that we have to ask ourselves. And for that, I think uh, what I always say is that I'm just trying to show you one slide there. Uh, just tell me when you start seeing it. Huh? Yeah, we have to start with the first verb, which is refuse. No, we too much use recycle, reuse, and all of that. The first verb is refuse. What is it that you can refuse? You can refuse to change your mobile phones every 6 months or 1 year. You can refuse to, use disposable cutlery. There are so many things you can refuse. If you can't refuse, you can reduce. You can reduce electricity, petrol, diesel, water. You can reuse so many things. See, recycle is the last thing that you want to do. Recycle is an industry. It consumes natural resources and it pollutes. It's done both the things. So recycle is what you need to do only when everything else fails. But that is not a clear understanding. We promote recycle so much. It is important, but it is not sufficient. So I think this becomes the critical understanding of conscientious consumerism, that you need to refuse what you know is polluting, what is harmful for the environment, what is harmful for future generations, what is over extraction for nature. All of this is what we need to look at.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, in the last part, you talk about the various solutions, and just now you talked about the 6 R's, right? Starting from refuse to recycle.
Yeah.
But these are still, these are an attempts to reduce the problem, but it will not definitely eliminate the problem. One of the small solutions I want to suggest here is that see, I have put it in the note also. I will just read it. The correlation between high GDP and increased pollution raises important questions about the sustainability of economic growth. The COVID-19 pandemic provided a unique glimpse into the potential benefits of reduced human activity on the environment. Further research planet periodic recovery periods and to determine the optimal duration and frequency of such intervals. This could inform more effective strategies for balancing economic development with environmental conservation. What I am trying to say here is that the frequency and the duration, and if the society agrees to this kind of solutions, we have seen during the pandemic period, COVID period, that how much the nature was trying to recover so fast, so this should be considered in my opinion. And another thing is it true that then we must find another habitable planet as early as possible so that part of human population lives on that planet, allowing some rest to the earth? So I want your views, expert views on these aspects.
Yeah, I think this idea of allowing a recovery period for nature is very important. And that's exactly how a lot of our traditional communities, Adivasi communities, have been functioning. So, if I'm here in Konkan and we have the Kodi Samaj, Kodi is the fisher folk of Konkan, and they exactly do this. They give it a 3 month recovery period for the fish stock to regenerate, for the fish to breed. If you go to tribals, if you look at how the tribals harvest food, they don't harvest in the breeding season. They don't harvest, the naidus and the bills. They don't kill the pregnant
Yes.
animals. So this is exactly what was there. But the modern economy does not allow this. It
Yes.
simply moves away from this traditional wisdom that we had and gets into a stage where 24 by 7, 365 days a year, you have to generate income. And we have to report to boards of directors every 3 months, every quarter. So we are in a hyper competitive mode. Survive, I mean, compete or perish. That's the word that we teach in our management schools. So it goes beyond. So business as usual is what we have to move away from. And this is one way of doing that. The second question you asked me is about whether do we need to find another planet. I think as humanity, we have done many stupid and foolish things. This is another stupid and foolish thing that we will get into if you want to. Let's not even think about it. I think nature should take its toll. Nature has to reduce our population by whatever means it has. COVID 19 showed us nature's capacity to reduce our population. There is only one predator that we have, and that is a bacteria or a virus. And our guns are useless. Our defense equipment is useless to protect us from our predators, and
True.
that is nature's way of building resilience into itself. It can, if nature decides, it can predate upon the human species, on Homo sapiens. So we are fortunate that it is possible.
Thank you for your prolific thoughts. Very, thank you so much.
Thank you. Correct.
Sir, one question. Um, you are right because human beings are the more destroyer than any other living lives in the earth. I think. Even though many of the people know that we are destroying the environment and it is going to challenge for us even now and the future, um, our behavior is the major reason for all things. The behavior change, we also do a lot of activities, but that is extremely meager. Maybe the nature's somebody, our Sanjay ji has said that nature has sent the invoices. It is right, like uneven rain or even natural calamities are teach us much more. But whatever we try in a small way, of course, it has some effect, but still we need to some more. And do you have any idea on bringing behavioral change in this aspect much faster or more effective?
If you look at what is influencing our behavior, the economy is influencing our behavior. The urge to generate income for ourselves is guiding our behavior. Right from parents of children, parents are telling their child to get to become engineers and doctors because that is a profession where you earn more money instead of becoming a biologist or a zoologist or an ecologist or a hydrogeologist, because these are not highly paying careers. So right from there, we influence behavior which is based on competitiveness. So every decision that we do, the reason why we change our mobile phones is we want to perform more efficiently. Why do we want to perform efficiently? Because that will help us compete better in the economy. So the economy has become a central cocoon where all our behavior is being influenced. So if we have to change it, that is where we have to start. And if we have to start there, we have to start at least on two counts. One is children's education needs to change dramatically, and second is adult education. We have to educate the parents of young children because they are the ones who are going to influence the next generation, and they are taught in the business as usual economy. So these two things are extremely important. For example, when I said that pollution, in nature there is no pollution, where do you find this sentence in any school education? Nowhere. Where do you find the sentence that every rupee that is made in the economy consumes natural resources? Nowhere. So then we create citizens of the future who are completely blind to the fact that economic growth is creating the problem that our generation is facing. So education has a massive role in that, not just for children's education but also adult education.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Sir, what is the guidance given in our scriptures, Vedas, and other Puranas for this kind of problems? Is there anything which will guide us a wisdom for such problems?
I think this is what I usually do. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing that we are taught is Samudra Vasade Devi
Devi
Parvate
Parvatasan Mandali.
Namastudyam Padasparsha Kshamaswame.
Correct.
Oh my earth, I am so fortunate to have been born on you. It is you are so important to me that let me begin the day by touching your feet.
Yes.
Because this is an acknowledgement that without nature you cannot survive.
Yes. Right. But are there any direct, I mean, is this problem encountered in in those days and
Oh yes,
some
oh
sort of
yes.
solution?
See, I am not a student of Vedic literature or something, but whatever little I have studied, I have seen a lot of references in Tarka Sangraha and Naiyayikas and Tarka followers. Tarka Sangraha, Tarka Shastra, Naiyayikas. All of them they talk about how the Earth's functioning is so important for human being, and they talk about logic, they talk about mathematics, they talk about the guiding principles of nature. So this becomes a foundational understanding of um, the why, the question of why we are here and how we are surviving.
Yeah, what you say, yeah, I came across one YouTube video where they say, particularly your Konkan region, the Ganesh idol is made of the soil, I mean earth, and then the Panchamrut,
Yeah.
that acts to increase the activity of the microbes in the earth. So,
Hmm.
and the idol is immersed on the upper part of the river, so that
Upstream.
when the river flows down, it distributes the panchamrut and the soil
Yeah.
evenly, to the fields,
Yeah.
and that is how it helps. And this time is when the field is coming maturing. So this is how it helps.
Absolutely. So, in fact, what you just said was written by my very good friend Rajendra Bhatt. So, Rajendra Bhatt is a natural farmer in Badlapur, Karzar, and in one of his books, he has written about this.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Pranam, and it was indeed a pleasure to listen such a enlightened talk covering all aspects of the sustainability. I have a basic dilemma. It is like this. Globally, when we see that India's position is seen as a country which consumes much lesser resources than its share of population. We
Per
sustain
capita.
per capita because we sustain 17% of the global population, and our electricity consumption is around one fourth or one fifth of the global average. So the energy consumption is one third of the global average. Our emissions are also now around 40% of the global average. So that way we are seen as a society which does not consume at par with the global average. That is one. Development aspirations of the masses, particularly the kind of inequalities within the society exist, that there is a strata of the society which consumes much higher than that. If you compare with the society which does not consume at all, particularly you gave some examples of the Koris or Bhils or those who live in the village, sustainable atmosphere and live a life which is nearly in tune with nature, that grow, eat, no more aspirations for the more financial wealth or other things also. Now, individually having a life which is sustainable that way and in pursuit to the respecting the global resources is fine. But as a nation, India is certainly looking for an aim of competing with the world average, at least, particularly in terms of the energy consumption, in terms of the economic developmental wealth generation, and in terms of our standard of living also. We we find that how these two conflicting things can be completely melted down to a unified aim, that is national aim as well as the individual aim, both sync well each other. So I am not clear that how to handle this, but anyway, we have been doing in the government also is looking for the sustainable development goals or working on these directions. But at the same time, we always look. You rightly may pointed out that our GST reform is primarily aimed at increasing the consumption so that our economy thrives further. That is there. So, what is your commentary on that? Thank you, sir. Thank you for this great talk, also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A couple of things. I think we always say that as a nation, our per capita electricity consumption is lowest, or not lowest, but one of the lowest in the world. Our per capita generation of plastic is very low. Per capita, everything, resource consumption is low. But for the planet, per capita is irrelevant. For the planet, what matters is aggregate consumption. We are 1.4 billion people. You multiply it by 2 kgs or 5 kgs or whatever, it creates a phenomenal load. Per capita makes sense only to an economist, not to the planet, not to the biosphere. So we have to come out of these shackles of saying that our per capita energy is low, our per capita electricity is low, our per capita plastic is low, per capita consumption of Coca-Cola is low. It is irrelevant. It is aggregate which matters. And in aggregate, we are number 2 or number 3 in the world for emissions and consumption of energy and all that. So this is the first and the foremost thing which I would like to say. Second is, this is also what happens when in my if you remember my about last 3 or 4 slides where I said that we have made a mistake of putting growth as the goal, not development. When you put growth as the goal, you think about per capita consumption because that's quantitative. Growth is quantitative, development is qualitative. So you can measure something, that's growth. So if you can measure per capita consumption of electricity, that's growth. But what are you using the electricity for? That will be development. So we have made a big mistake of putting growth as on a pedestal and worshipping it. We have put GDP on the pedestal and we are worshipping it. Instead, we have to put sustainable development on the pedestal and worship it. So, what is our end goal? Is it economic growth or is it well-being of the society? And if it is well-being of the society, then it should not matter what is our per capita consumption.
Thank you, sir. Gudas ji, it was very enlightening for us to hear listen to you. I have a question. So, from your speech, we clearly understood that all the existing economic activities are unsustainable. Yeah, the growth model is not sustainable at all. We know, as a group of people, we know, and the people who are responsible for this growth-led economy, they are more knowledgeable than us, and they also should be knowing that this will be destructive. But why they are not continuing this? But why are they not considering sustainable growth? What leads them towards destructive destination?
A couple of reasons, and I think the most important reason is that those who are in the power, they can only show quantitative growth. See, if in a democracy you are elected for 5 years, and in 5 years you can only show the number of schools you have increased, not the quality of education has improved. How many schools have increased in rural areas is growth. But what is the quality of education is development. And you cannot quantify development. It's very difficult to say in your next election propaganda that you have improved the quality of education. But you can show growth. I have increased 20 different schools in my constituency. Possible. I have increased 200 beds in a hospital. Possible. But I cannot show that I have made the society healthier. So in a democracy which is going to be elected for 5 years, the only thing that you can show is quantitative growth. And therefore, we tend to over estimate, not overestimate, over uh, what should I say? We tend to give undue importance to growth instead of development. I think that is the fundamental fault in our democracy, in the way we have structured, electoral democracy, so to say.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Gurudas ji.
सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत् ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Thank you one and all.